ballpark on Tuesday night with my wife and eating hot dogs, drinking beer, and watching baseball. The Birds are home all weekend against the Tampa Rays, and we'll continue to discuss Ubaldo Jimenez and more. But I'm going to take and turn my attention up to Boston right now, get up to New England and talk to a longtime sports writer and a guy who spent a significant period of time here in Baltimore as a sports writer as well. A long time at the Boston Globe, now at the Boston Herald, and also one of our partners with Talk of Fame Network. And, of course, we run that programming here on Sunday mornings at WNST.net. We welcome Ron Borges, one of our defending champions, back onto the program, and you can follow his journey out on Twitter at Ron Borges. That's Borges. Ron, happy summer to you, man. I saw you were at Old Oakmont last weekend, and yeah, you were covering golf as opposed to Paulina Gretzky, right?
That's right, although I did take a peek every now and then when she was walking around, to tell you the truth.
Hey, man, I don't know. I mean, I don't know if you're not human, and I'm not a dirty old man at all, but I mean, hey, she probably should have had some more clothing on, but certainly for Johnson in picking up another major, a major, I should say, you now have this diversity in golf that maybe didn't exist when Tiger Woods was just running away with everything. Every tournament becomes interesting, and I know, the word now on the Rio and the Olympics and Zika, guys are avoiding that to stay back, but the world of golf is a little more wide open right now, right?
Yeah, no doubt about it. I mean, the days of, one year Tiger Woods won 10 tournaments, that's just not going to happen because the level of competition is. Now, some people say, well, no one is as good as Tiger Woods. I'm not so sure it's as much that as it is the level of competition is so much higher now, in particular because you got all the international players that are vastly improved over what they were 15 or 20 years ago. You got Rory McIlroy, from Northern Ireland. You got Jason Day from Australia. You've got all these guys, and then you've still got the great Americans like Jordan Spieth and Dustin Johnson, who finally broke through over the weekend. So it's a pretty strong lineup, and that's why you can see anybody can get hot. Guy Danny Willits from England wins the Masters, and a lot of people saying, "Who's he?" Well, he's a really good golfer. Having said that, I watched him break his putter over his knee on Saturday because he was having a tough day. So it's a pretty deep lineup of great golfers. All
right, man, I'm going to take this conversation in a lot of different directions with you, Ron, because how many years have you been a sports writer now?
42 years, long time.
42. How many years in Baltimore? I want to give you a little bio here through your own words. How many years were you here?
Yeah, Baltimore, I was only there for the 2 seasons, 82 and 83, but, Earl's last year, and then, of course, the championship season. So that was a great time to be there, and it was, I feel very blessed and fortunate to spend a few years in Baltimore, a great town, as you know, and being around Earl Weaver and the Orioles, which at that time certainly ran a great organization, and to me, what they were with him and Hank Peters is what every team should try to be.
Yeah, I saw Freddie Ullman, who's been with the San Diego Padres for 20-some-odd years, and his dad was at the game, and he was such a part of all those teams and scouting guys through that era and into the late 80s as well. It is sort of a glory era, and the Orioles have gotten better. But I want to talk about greatness because, you've seen so many things, but when I think of you, I think of football. I mean, you've covered the NFL for a long time and had a lot of bad football up in Foxborough before this sort of glorious era of Belichick and Brady and winning championships. But I think about you covering boxing, and I wanted to reach to you 2 weeks ago on the Ali thing, and I kind of want to tie all this together. A full disclosure, Ron, I almost came up to Foxborough over the weekend to see Messi play my Venezuelan team. I thought that would be a mismatch. I almost went down to Houston, and I'm kind of embarrassed I didn't go on Tuesday, but I did have a nice time at the Oriole Padre game with my wife. I got to wear my Tony Gwynn jersey. I got to see some friends like Eddie Lauer and some other dear friends at the ballpark. But, I should have gone to see Messi play. I would have seen that incredible goal on Tuesday, but I am going to the Meadowlands on Sunday to see Messi play in the championship, and maybe I'll be there the one night he actually holds a trophy up for his country for the very first time. And I appreciate greatness, I got to see Beckham play. I got to see all the greats play, whether it was Kareem or Magic or Bird or Dr. J's last game I saw, in Philadelphia. So I've seen all this stuff, and obviously in Baltimore with football, Johnny U to Joe Namath played the first game I ever saw. So, I see all of this stuff and all these Super Bowls you and I have run around to, but I never saw Ali. And, did you see Ali fight in person?
Oh, sure. Yeah.
Many times, right?
Yeah, many times.
Well, give me
And,
some Ali, because it's 2 weeks removed, but I can't imagine that in your life, maybe you saw Pele play, maybe you've seen Messi play. There's nothing quite like seeing Ali.
no, I agree with you there, and I agree with your point on greatness. I've done that and continue to do it with my own kids and my family. I always tell them, you may not be a fan of ballet, but if Baryshnikov is dancing, let's go watch him. You may not be fans of a particular type of music, but if Miles Davis is playing jazz, go listen to him. I just think it's important to see greatness in all its different forms, and certainly Ali. I've been blessed, as you have, to be around a lot of great athletes in there. And I was doubly blessed in that I got to become friends with Ali and over the years. And it never been around a guy in my mind who was as great as he was. First off, as a fighter in his first iteration, there was never been a heavyweight with the speed and all of that Ali had. And then to come back from exile after 3.5 years and find a new way to beat all the best fighters in the world. Said a lot about him as a boxer, but he was, as a person, just, to me, the essence of what we all should try to be, which was not perfect, which was one of the sad things that as he passed, I think there were a lot of efforts to make him perfect. And look, he wasn't a perfect man, but he was a man who moved people and a guy who was able to do what most of us cannot do, which is A, admit when he was wrong, and B, then apologize for it, as he did with Joe Frazier. That didn't satisfy Joe, and I understood Frazier's pain in what Ali put him through. Having said that, it takes a big man to do that, and Ali was certainly the biggest man I've ever been around.
When did you meet Ali, and when did you see him fight? And give me a little bit of background for you in the 60s and 70s. I've told story. I was born in 68, Ron, so I'm 47. I have incredible memories of 72, 73, 74 in sports. I would say the last Frazier fight, I remember, sort of some controversy after that. Certainly the Ken Norton fight, I remember that. And he fought twice at the Capitol Center, and one of my neighbors went to the Jimmy Young fight and had a ticket stub from it, and I thought it was the most amazing thing ever. My dad never paid for, went to the closed circuits at the arena or the Towson Center, which is where they were in that era in the 70s. I remember them famously not working. But I caught on to Sugar Ray Leonard in 76 in Montreal and, followed Leonard's career. Now, I didn't see him fight Vega or, those guys at the Civic Center either. I was a little young for that. And then, of course, he went on to be in Atlantic City and Vegas for the most part. And, I've had Phil Jackman on who went to those Leonard fights and all the Ali fights. Alan Goldstein, before he passed away 5 years ago, sat for hours. I sat in his home with him and his wife. And, of course, he wrote a book on Ali and talked about going up to Pennsylvania for the training sessions and all of that and flying over to Africa for fights and, all of that. But I don't know how many of those you covered, but I want to give you my impressions of Ali are very struck by the fat Ali, sort of like the fat Elvis. I remember the fat Elvis. I don't remember the crooning, a movie guy Elvis from the 50s and 60s. But your Ali's different than my Ali, right?
Sure. Yeah. I mean, look, I wouldn't normally use this term to describe a man, but physically, Muhammad Ali was a beautiful person. I mean physically, he was a beautiful guy. You wanted to look like he looked. That's for sure. For a long time, I got to know him in the early '70s and on from there. Saw those great fights that he was involved in.
So the first time you walked, you had a notebook and a pen, and who were you working for?
Yeah, I was just starting out. I was working in California, and he was training in Pennsylvania, as he did in those years in Deer Lake, which, by the way, as an aside, I got to go back with him he invited a bunch of us back when his book came out, and we went up and spent a day at his old training camp, of course, where he, long past fighting. It was just great to be back there and have all those memories of what it was like. But I was in awe of the guy. I had grown up. He was my guy, and Joe Louis was my dad's guy, and we would argue over who would win if they had fought each other. He believed in Joe Louis, and I believed in Muhammad. But he's one of those guys that even if you didn't know who he was, you had no clue who this guy is, and you walked into a room, you'd know pretty quickly that he was somebody, somebody different, somebody that everyone's sort of looking at. And that was sort of presence he had, Nestor. But the thing about him was, he loves people. He really loves people. Even when he was espousing in the mid-'60s, the sort of racism of the Nation of Islam at the time, which he later rejected, he still couldn't help himself from loving people. And that was always the way he was. And I'll tell you a story, which to me, I wrote about this after he passed, and I think it encapsulates everything about Muhammad Ali. I was at the Super Bowl one year in Miami, and it was Friday, and I was on the bus going up to the commissioner's party when they still had a commissioner's party. Well, they still do, but they used to want us to go. Now they don't. But on this bus waiting to go, leave the hotel, and I hear this voice, familiar voice, says, "Hey, bro, what are you doing?" And I look, and it's Howard Bingham, Ali's dearest friend, started from L.A., and he's coming on the bus, and who's behind him but Muhammad? Muhammad, reaches out, shakes hands, but laughing, sits down, and now we're going out to, I believe it was at the convention center where this big party was. Now, first off, Nestor, think about that. You know athletes as well as anybody. You think any of these guys today are getting on the bus to go out to a party? No, they're not. They're in some car with, frosted glass. But there he was on the bus with regular people, and, of course, causing a commotion. And now we get to the arena, and there's some dignitaries waiting for him, including Don Shula. And so we're walking up the stairs, and they're trying to rush Ali in there. And all of a sudden, Ali just sort of turns to the right and starts to walk away. And Shula says to him, Muhammad, wait a minute. Over here. We got to go over here. There's some important people over here, meaning behind the velvet ropes. And Muhammad, without missing a beat, said, well, there's some important people in here, too. And he pushed open the service doors and went in the kitchen.
Really?
Which he knew was going to be filled primarily with African-Americans and Hispanic workers. And the place went berserk. It was pandemonium. And he loved it more than they did. and when he came out, I said to him, that was pretty interesting. And he looked at me with those bug eyes he could get, and he said to me, you want to eat or not? Meaning these are the most important people. You think we're important? We don't eat them. It's not for these people. And I wrote that story as a reminder to all of us, and I am proud to say, never had this happen before. Got a nice note from a guy. Told me he gave the column to his pastor, and his pastor read it as the Sunday sermon that Sunday after Ali died, which really really made me feel great. And
That's
the point
awesome.
of it was, to me, the point of it was that was the message of Muhammad Ali. The important people aren't all behind the velvet rope. They're in the kitchen.
Ron Borges here from the Boston Herald and from Talk of Fame Network. You can hear conversations with Ron, as well as Clark Judge and Rick Gosselin and some other friends at the Talk of Fame Network here at WNST's. On Sunday afternoons, we run that, and I should say you have virtually everyone from the football world on, right? I mean, full access pretty much to anyone you want.
Yeah, pretty much. We've been fortunate that way between the three of us. We've probably covered the NFL for 100 years. We know just about everybody, and this week we have Blake Bortles on because we're doing, as you know, series on different divisions and what we think. So we got Bortles on there, and we had Mike Mularkey, who's coach down in Tennessee, and we tried to get a coach and a player each week. And we get, like you say, just about everybody you can expect. A lot of guys you might not expect. We had Joe Namath on, who doesn't do many of these things. We had the commissioner on, who's been hiding under a chair for the last couple of years.
Well, from a Baltimore perspective, you've had Ed Reed, Rod Woodson, John Harbaugh. You've had all those guys on, yeah.
Yeah. No, that's exactly right. And it's been fun to do, and we try to, theme things and come up with some different ideas and a different sort of way to look at it. We all know football's been, pretty heavily covered, and the idea of the show was to try to find some way to bring fans something different, and all three of us are Hall of Fame voters, so we try to take a little historical context into things. In fact, we did a thing over Father's Day where we were looking for somebody, father-son combination. And we got Jackie Slater, the Hall of Fame offensive lineman from the Rams, and, of course, his son Matthew Slater has been a tremendous special teams player and Pro Bowl player and Super Bowl champion with the Patriots. And, you never know quite what you're going to get. And Jackie came on last week and talked about how if his son had taken his advice, he never would have played a minute of pro football. It was just sort of fascinating. He talked about, everybody talks about he must have done a good job as a dad because, his son is really exemplary human being. And yet, if he had listened to me, he never would have played football. So it was sort of fascinating to hear a guy talk about it, and how, of course, his son has won a number of Super Bowls, and he didn't win any, but he's in the Hall of Fame, and sort of balancing those two different things. So we try to do a lot of that, and we're lucky that we do get the cooperation of most everybody in the league.
How many Super Bowls have you covered now, Ron?
I tried to figure that out last year. The first one was 1975. So 75 and 25.
37, 36, yeah. 38, somewhere in there?
Yeah,
okay,
yeah,
out of the
like
50.
That.
I mean, you've been around the league a long time, and you would note, as we all would, I mean, I've been covering the league for 23 years myself. I've been to 23 Super Bowls. I look at it as a changing, not necessarily in a good way or a bad way, but sort of a unique way, and I think the problem's unique to this much money, this much fame, this much power for all the 32 owners and where the sport is, and having one guy like Goodell sort of adjudicate this. And you go back very much so to Pete Rozelle, where the league was about trying to get on the map and be marketed and grow and grow and grow. I don't know how much more they can grow, but they're trying. And underneath of all of this are these things that used to be sort of cheating that was allowed, things that were looked the other way. And now we see Goodell having to figure out things like air pressure in football, right?
Exactly.
That take 2 years to adjudicate. And the reason that happens is because of bounties on quarterbacks' heads in New Orleans and pumping in noise in Atlanta and general managers tweeting and messaging to the field in Cleveland and all of these sort of broken rules. I mean, we have a period now of legal tampering. Now, I mean, try to explain that to me. Legal tampering, right? Because everyone in the league is trying to skirt the rules, and we're trying to figure out just how much videotaping someone else's practice, what the value would be in that. But then we see the Patriots have this unprecedented run of success and no fumbling at home, and everyone in the league believing that the locker room is bugged when you go into Foxborough, and you're there trying to cover it in this era where, look, I've seen John Madden accuse Three Rivers Stadium's crew in the 70s of pre-icing down the field because it would slow a football team down, or how the blades of grass will be cut and how the grass will be watered. But the amount of cheating and the amount of gamesmanship, shall we say, has led to this mess that you write about and have to cover with a straight face up in New England. And it's really more about who's got bigger testicles at this point, right? Because there's very little doubt that there was some cheating or gamesmanship going on. But the question would be, did it lead to championships or not? And I guess that's for guys like you and me who are going to try to paint history 10 or 15 years from now, how that's going to treat the Patriots in the end, because they got a fistful of rings and they've sold a lot of tickets and they've made a lot of money, and no one's ever going to take any of that away at this point.
No, that's right. And look, everything's changed a lot. I'm actually about 25% of the way through a book with a guy you may recall, Upton Bell, who was the personnel director of the Colts teams and the Super Bowl teams that Shula had there, and Don McCafferty. His dad, of course, was Bert Bell, the commissioner. And we're recalling that sort of era, the 60s and 70s, and how it led to what we have today. And right to your point, there was look. I was covering the Raiders at the time that the Steelers froze the field. There's no question that they left the tarp up and watered it down the night before on the sidelines, so that the Raiders, used to run all those out routes and sideline routes, and now guys were falling all over themselves. That went on. Is it cheating? Is it not cheating? Well, there was a time when it was you didn't like it, but you accepted it.
But what was Pete Rozelle going to do about it then?
Well, that's right, and you weren't going to sue anybody over it. Now everybody sues everybody all the time, does anybody other than people in New England really believe that the ideal gas law deflated those footballs, but didn't deflate the Colts footballs? I mean, come on. So who's kidding who, But now there's access on both sides.
So hang on. I want to. That's a really important part of this. You think they cheated?
Yeah, I do.
So do I. I mean,
I don't think it affected the game. I think they could have played that game with a watermelon. wasn't going to make any difference. The Patriots were going to slaughter the Colts.
I have very little doubt that the Ravens were a big part of outing them. I don't have any proof, and nobody's ever said that to me. I've never talked to Dean Pease off the side of my mouth about it, or Chuck Pagano, even though I know them very well. But I'm pretty sure that, the pipeline really begins with the Ravens losing the 2-touchdown game and feeling like it wasn't necessarily on the up and up when they felt the footballs come to the sidelines.
Oh, sure. I agree with you. I don't have any solid proof of that, but I have enough anecdotal proof to believe that that's where it started. And frankly, what I really believe is it started after the game when, the Ravens game, when someone asked Brady about Harbaugh complaining about the formation that they used and him saying, well, maybe they ought to read the rule book. But to me, that was the kind of thing that was an unwise statement. It's one thing to beat somebody. It's one thing to sort of even do it by trickery to a degree.
Well, when you're tricking the officials,
to rub their face in it, and I think that was the beginning of the whole thing.
Well, I mean, that's a very astute observation. Ron Borges joining us here from the Boston Herald. I don't think I've ever had anybody say that on the radio. 18 months later, not anybody from the Ravens side or the media side here, but I do remember that. I was in that locker room, and I remembered John Harbaugh having to answer questions for something that no one in the history of professional football had ever seen, right? Literally.
Right.
And the chicanery on trying to confuse the officials. I mean, the one thing you never really think about from a strategic standpoint is how can we screw the officials up? That's like WWE. That's Baron Mikel Cicluna stuff. That's not like how are we going to try to confuse the linebackers or get a safety to bite up, which is part of the strategy of the game. Belichick's now trying to confuse the officials. One thing, you intimidate the officials. We see that in every sport. Buck barking from the dugout about a strike or whatever. But it's a whole different thing to say, let's screw with the officials here, and that'll get to the league office, and we'll look smarter than the rest of them. But you do look smarter when you're still playing football next week and Harbaugh's not.
Sure. And one of the things that didn't happen in that particular context, and as I said, I've been covering the NFL for 42 years. Normally, if you're going to do something unusual that maybe is within the letter of the law but not the spirit of the law, which is what I would argue happened in the Ravens game, you tell the officials before the game so they know what's coming. Just like, for example, New Orleans did in the Super Bowl when they were going to try the onside kick. They alerted the official so that they're ready. So that there's not going to be some craziness going on that you make a great play and somehow they take it away from you. Well, the Patriots didn't do that in this case. Why not? Well, I don't think that even they would say that we thought that they were going to run over and tell the Ravens. I think it was. It was an example of what has gotten them the reputation that they've done, which I think there's a little bit of an obsession down there to sort of be like the kid in the class who's always shooting his hand up and got every answer. I'm just a little bit smarter than you are, and now I'm going to show it by making you look stupid. And that's what happened in this case.
Has there been any real pain for the Patriots in this? Anything?
No.
I mean, it's just been more like a nuisance, and it sort of plays. Brady sort of likes the black hat, and the black hat and the white sweater. Like when he showed up at the Super Bowl in that white sweater, it's like that's sort of a go-to, right? And and he's going to the Hall of Fame, and he's got a fistful of rings, and he's got the Super Bowl white. What difference does it make? Yeah, wink, wink. I took a little air out of the footballs. Okay, I gave the kid $500 or whatever. But the whole cover-up of it and the denial by the Patriots kingdom and some members of the Boston media, it's sort of jaw-dropping from my perspective here. But I'm seeing a presidential campaign right now that's sort of jaw-dropping for me as well. So I guess anything's possible in our culture these days, even sort of outright cheating and winking about it and getting away with it after the parade, right?
Yeah, well, I thought that the strategic mistake that they made, and this is nothing that I haven't said before and written about, was when they landed on the Sunday of Super Bowl week, and Bob Kraft, the owner, came out and really went on the offensive, sort of demanding an apology from the NFL for even investigating this football, the issue of the air in the footballs, because to me it was time to play defense. Look, you got away with it, but now it's time to play defense. And instead, they did what I think has gotten them in trouble in the past, which is go even more on the offense. And so they put the commissioner in a position where he couldn't be lenient if he wanted to be lenient at that point. because now you're totally looking like you caved to this owner who's demanding an apology and talking about how terribly his coach and quarterback's been treated. When what he should have said is, well, we don't believe we did anything wrong. We understand why they're investigating this because the charge has been made, and we'll see how it works out. But certainly I would defend my quarterback and my coach, and I believe them. Don't believe we did anything illegal. Don't believe we monkeyed with the footballs, but I understand why they feel they have to look into this since a charge was made. And just leave it at that. Instead, you pound on the table. You know, there's an old saying, lawyers all will tell you, if the law's on your side, you pound the law. If the law's not on your side, you pound the table. And they've been pounding the table for 2 years, which really makes me wonder about the whole thing. But I don't think that they've suffered. You know, if you listen to them, it's like the most egregious thing that's ever happened. You know, well, let's go right back to the start of the show here. You want to talk about unfair things happen to somebody? Let's talk about Muhammad Ali. Let's not talk about deflated football. You know, this guy lost the prime years of his career for doing nothing illegal. And the Patriots really haven't lost anything. The people who support them and like them and believe in them haven't changed, and the people who hate them and think they cheat at every turn, that hasn't changed either. The fact of the matter is, you can't cheat your way to the success that the Patriots have had. You can't. Even if you're cheating, you can't. It's not like Lance Armstrong on the bike, where, you know, he's on high test and I'm on regular. Because frankly, as you pointed out, Nestor, they're all cheating to some extent in these sports, what they think they can get away with. And you get caught or you don't get caught.
Well, I mean, it's hard for Harbaugh to yell cheater, cheater, pumpkin eater when he's putting guys in pads, a rookie camp and gets caught. And certainly for the Ravens and everything that happened with Ray Rice, which, there's a whole side book on that as well as to who knew what and where and who saw the video and who didn't want to see the video. But all of that, again, comes back to Goodell. And we all say, well, Goodell makes $40 million a year and he's smug and he's this and he's that. And, that is a really thankless position to be in, and I go back to the original point, which is you got 32 billionaires who always think they're right. You work for them. Anything you rule on, you're going to be unpopular on the other side. I mean, look at this fiasco with Los Angeles and with the Spanos family. I've been on the phone with San Diego all week because the Orioles are playing the Padres. So I've been talking to some San Diego people about that side of things and what the Raiders represent and what Las Vegas represents, and now the NHL's going in there. All of this stuff is swirling around. And meanwhile, you've got your best team cheating, and you're trying to figure out how to make them stop. And there's no fine, there's no slap on the wrist, there's no suspension, there's none of that matters when you've cheated and won and gotten away with it. You got 31 other pissed off owners. Well,
you're right, and when when you work and have authority to a degree at least over 32 people who never hear the word no. Right off the bat, you're in pretty troubling waters and difficult sort of waters, number one. Now, I don't think Goodell handled this or the Ray Rice case or the Adrian Peterson case very well, and I think that's caused different types of problems. But I think in the end, just as you alluded to in this goofy presidential election we have going, Bernie Sanders is onto something, whether we're talking about sports or we're talking about politics. In the end, the problems all come down to money. Too much money, too few people controlling that money, too few people wanting all the money for themselves, and it bleeds into all these different problems.
Well, then there's also the greed for the money leads to the cheating. Coach wants to keep a job to make money, he'll cheat. Coach needs to win to keep his job, he'll cheat. And the same thing could be stepped to the next level of the physical health of, hey, if you don't get out there and play, we're going to come take your job. And Eugene Monroe does the cannabis thing and and all that, and he's on the street looking, speaking out, speaking your mind. Everybody has the ability to do that, but then what are the consequences?
Sure, no, you're right, and it's gotten to a point where I think whether we're talking about the Ravens and Harbaugh and practicing in pads, or whether we're talking about Brady and the Patriots, maybe or maybe not deflating footballs, the justification becomes what I call the Lance Armstrong justification.
Everybody else is doing it.
Yeah, if Nestor Aparicio and I are both competing, and we convince ourselves that the other guy's cheating, and we cheat too, then we're not really cheating. We're just leveling the field off. That's how their mind works. I try to raise my children in the opposite. It's just because somebody else is doing it doesn't mean it's okay for you to do it. But these guys look at it and say, I'm sure that Harbaugh would say, what do you think? None of the 31 other guys are in pads when they shouldn't be in pads. Of course they are. So-and-so did it, or whatever the case might be. So same sort of thing in this case. If you remember, what did Brady to this day, I don't think, I may be wrong about this, ultimately maybe he did, but certainly early on he did not ever really deny it. What he said was, I don't believe I was cheating. Well, that can just, you can make a statement like that to justify damn near anything. Did I steal from the store where I work? Well, not really, because they underpay me and they don't pay me overtime and they're stealing from me. So I'm just trying to level the books.
And I forgot to pay them for it. I just forgot, right? I mean,
exactly.
That's always I don't recall, right? That's always the line.
Sure, and that becomes a justification for all these things. And I think that the NFL that we knew, and certainly when I started out in the early 70s, is so different from today, and so, in my mind, less humane, although the game itself was more violent back in those days. They were more normal people. Certainly, if you go back, as I've done, working on this book in Baltimore, the relationship that existed between the public and the Colts of the 1950s and 60s will never happen again. Where Johnny Unitas is sitting in a bar next to Joe the plumber. Just not going to happen, and because you can't even find Johnny Unitas other than when he's playing. Because he's in a gated community now with huge things, and he's in, Cadillac Escalades with frosted lights, and he's got people around him, and he loses sight of who he is, and we lose sight of who they are, and the next thing you know, everything's different, and so it becomes only about the winning. Everything's defined by winning. Look, Johnny Unitas didn't win all the time. He lost more than he won in the grand scheme of things in terms of championships. But you couldn't convince anybody in Baltimore of that. Well, these days, Flacco's only won one Super Bowl. That's the difference. It's like, that's pretty good winning a Super Bowl. Yeah, but they should have done this and he should have done that. And that changes the dynamic, I think.
Hey, Ron, we'll be listening on Sunday when you get together with Clark and with Goose and doing the Talk of Fame Network. We run the Talk of Fame Network on Sundays here. Ron Borges is at the Boston Herald and anywhere boxing and football are, and even a little bit of golf out there. Man, it was great having you on. Great insights into all this stuff, and it's always a pleasure. And I'm sorry it took me a couple weeks to get you on talking some Ali, but I'm glad we did it, man.
Sure thing, and I always enjoy talking. Anytime you need me, give me a holler.
There he goes, Ron Borges, the man, the myth, the legend. 42 years of sports writing and the Talk of Fame, and, of course, Hall of Fame voters. And 3 of them get together every Sunday here and do some great sports radio and some great conversations with some football people. Blake Bortles is on this week, amongst others. You can learn more at Talk of Fame Network out on the internet and follow any of those 3 fellows. They do a great, great job. You can find me out in the Bayou Toyota Audioval 24 hours a day from anywhere in the world on your mobile device. Birds home all weekend against the Tampa Rays. Luke will be on the scene there. If there is any breaking news, it'll come to you first on the WNST Tech Service. That's brought to you by Coons Ford of Security Boulevard. And our morning newspaper still hits your email inbox at 7 a.m. each and every morning, and that's powered up by Planet Fitness and PlanetFitness.com. Got a whole bunch of rock and roll interviews from the 1980s, a bunch of rock and roll Hall of Famers from Billy Joel and John Bon Jovi and Daryl Hall and the Black Crowes, and lots of musicians who've left us, including David Bowie and Dan Fogelberg and Brad Delp, Clarence Clemens, amongst others. All of that will be heard the week of July 11th. The hashtag in social media is WNST Rock Week. I'm Nestor. This is WNST.net, and we are AM 1570 Towson, Baltimore. And we never stop talking Baltimore sports